The movie opens in a distant future where the world has collapsed following an apocalypse. Australia is now primarily a desert wasteland with only 4 major centers of human activity. The biggest of them is the Citadel, a cluster of 3 rock towers that sit above a freshwater reservoir. It is the most powerful center in the wasteland and is ruled by Immortan Joe and his army of war boys. The second center is Gastown, a large refinery that has an abundance of gasoline. The third center is the Bullet Farm, a refurbished arms factory used for manufacturing ammunition to fuel the Citadel's war efforts. Lastly is the Green Place, a fertile part that is hidden from the Citadel and the other gangs that roam the wasteland. This secretive area is inhabited by the Vuvalini, a tribe of women who raise children and maintain the area's secrecy at any cost. One day, a young Vuvalini girl named Furiosa is out picking peaches with her friend Valkyrie on the outskirts of Green Place. Just then, they hear a noise, and despite Valkyrie's objections, Furiosa goes to investigate. Unfortunately, she's captured by a group of the Bike Horde. Furiosa's mother, Mary Jabasa, and the Vuvalini general immediately spring into action. Mary rides a horse, while the general joins her with a rifle. After sniping one of the kidnappers and seeing the rest beginning to get away, the general dismounts and gives Mary her rifle so that she can continue the chase more quickly. A few kilometers later, Mary kills 2 bikers and takes their bikes and supplies. Meanwhile, Furiosa also sabotages the pipe carrying the gasoline of her kidnapper's motorcycle, slowing them down. As a result, Mary's able to follow them back to the headquarters of their boss, the warlord Dementus. Upon their arrival, one of the lieutenants brings Furiosa to Dementus and tells him that the young girl is from a place of abundance. Dementus then orders his men to take her to another tent and safeguard her from any men that might pursue her. Meanwhile, Mary Jabasa, who has been scoping the situation from a distance, infiltrates the camp disguised as one of Dementus's men. She kills several of them and then reaches the tent where Furiosa is being held. Inside, she discovers a woman cleaning her daughter. But the woman quickly throws her arms up and pleads for mercy. Mary chooses to spare her and leaves with Furiosa. But this proves to be an ill-fated decision. The woman immediately informs Dementus of what has just happened. Following this, Dementus begins a hunt for Mary and her daughter while a sandstorm rages around his headquarters. Mary attempts to lose him and his forces in the storm, but she soon realizes that they'll catch up. Hence, she stops and tells Furiosa to move on with a journey back to the Green Place. She then provides her daughter with a peach tree seed, telling her to plant it and protect their home. At first, Furiosa obeys and runs off, but only a short distance later, she returns to help her mother. Unfortunately, she ends up being captured along with her mother. Dementus then has his men string Mary upon a crucifix and torture her for the directions to the Green Place. When she refuses to answer, Dementus orders one of his men to finish her off. Following this, he cages up Furiosa, making her his prisoner. As the years pass, she's forced to witness the brutal ways in which Dementus punishes the deserters that run away from his group. In one such instance, he gives her a teddy bear to clutch as he conducts the dismemberment of a deserter by chaining his limbs to 4 motorcycles. One day, Dementus and his forces are out exploring the wasteland when they come across a war boy, a soldier of the forces of Immortan Joe from the Citadel. Dementus tells him that they're looking for a utopian area called the Place of Abundance and inquires if the war boy knows anything about it. The confused guy replies that his home, the Citadel, has an abundance of water and food. Thus, Dementus and his minions follow his directions to the Citadel. Once there, Dementus gives a rousing speech to the poor, starving, and common people. He tells them that if they cast down their leaders, they'll avoid suffering and sorrow. He further claims that they've been enslaved and exploited, but if they come to him, he will free them and they will all share the wealth. In the meantime, the ruthless leader of the Citadel, Immortan Joe, watches Dementus give his speech. This makes him really angry and annoyed. He then challenges his foe to select a single war boy from the ranks of hundreds that guard the Citadel. When Dementis does so, Immortan Joe orders the selected warboy to leap from a cliff with an explosive weapon called the Thunder Stick. Seconds later, the warboy jumps off the cliff without any hesitation and explodes when he hits the ground, wiping out one section of the enemy force. This makes Dementis realize that the warboys are so brainwashed that they don't even hesitate to end their own lives to protect Immortan Joe. Just then, the remaining warboys swarm Dementis' convoy, forcing them to retreat. With his forces now diminished, Dementis comes up with a new plan to capture one of the 3 fortresses of the Wasteland, Gastown. A few days after the skirmish at Citadel, he and his forces attack one of Immortan Joe's convoys that's headed towards Gastown. They succeed in fighting off the warboys and taking over a truck that's supposed to carry gasoline back to the Citadel. They then ride it into Gastown, disguising some of the men as warboys and pretending that the truck is under attack. They succeed in convincing the Gastown leaders to raise the gates. Once inside, they manage to capture, control, and keep the gates open, allowing the remainder of the forces to invade and overrun Gastown. Dementis then rigs the whole town with explosives. Next, he returns to the Citadel in order to strike a deal with Immortan Joe. Dementis explains that the bombs which he set up in Gastown are rigged by a combination that only he knows. He tells his enemies that if they do not agree to make him the leader of Gastown, he will set the bombs off and destroy Gastown completely. While tense talks between the two sides go on, Immortan Joe's attention is drawn to Furiosa. He notices that she's a completely healthy female, which is very rare to find in the Wasteland. He asks about her, and Dementis claims that she is his own child, referring to her as Little D. He also claims that she's completely mute, but at this moment, Furiosa speaks up for the first time since her capture, stating that Dementis is not her father and that he actually killed her mother. Hearing this, Immortan Joe agrees to the deal, but only if he gives up Furiosa. The latter reluctantly agrees, but he takes back the teddy bear he had given to her. Following this exchange, the young girl is led to Immortan Joe's harem, with an intention to raise her to be a healthy woman. When she reaches her youth, she'll be forced to become one of his wives. That night, in her own quarters, Furiosa secretly cuts off her long flowing hair, but attaches it to her scalp with makeshift glue. Suddenly, Immortan Joe's youngest son, Rictus Erectus, arrives and takes her to his own room. Just as he tries to clutch her hair, Furiosa escapes and hides beneath a bridge. Rictus tries to search for her, but pretends as if nothing is amiss so that he doesn't get blamed for her disappearance. As the days pass by, Furiosa disguises and reinvents herself, pretending to be a boy and joining up as one of the workers in Immortan Joe's crew. She finds herself in the House of Holy Motors, a workshop dedicated to building armored vehicles. She manages to hide herself by remaining completely mute and thus not allowing anyone to recognize that she's a girl from her voice. The goal of the project is to build a new war rig, a truck which will be used to fetch gasoline and ammunition for the Citadel. This powerful machine is to be driven by Praetorian Jack, known for having the most successful runs between the Citadel and Gastown. Unfortunately, on his very first run, the war rig comes under attack by a gang. The gang is led by Octobus, one of Dementis' men who has since gone rogue and created his own group. During the battle, Furiosa employs the war rig's weapons to great effect, helping to wipe out Octobus and his crew. But in return, everyone aboard the war rig is wiped out as well, except herself and Praetorian Jack. During this conflict, her disguise is stripped away, and Jack recognizes her as being a woman. She then holds Jack at gunpoint and tries to take the war rig from him. However, he easily rebuffs her attack, leaving her standing alone in the Wasteland Road. Just as it seems that all is lost for Furiosa, Praetorian Jack has a change of heart and returns to her. He has lost all of his crew and has to. One day, they visit Gastown to fuel up, only to find the place in chaos. Supplies are barely existent, and Dementis' grasp on the town has become weak. The two immediately flee from there and return to Immortan Joe to report what's happening. After a brief conversation, the latter sends them to Bullet Farm, where they're to load up on ammunition in order to take on Dementis and his men. However, Jack and Furiosa have secretly formulated their own plan. They plan to take the ammunition from Bullet Farm, lose all the war boys accompanying them, and flee to find the green place with the war rig and the weapons. But upon arrival at Bullet Farm, they discover Dementis and his men ransacking the town. Praetorian Jack uses the war rig to force his way through the gate, while Furiosa assumes a sniper position, hoping to take out Dementis from a distance. However, the warlord easily manages to dodge her shot. In the ensuing conflict, the war rig is lost, and the couple is forced to flee in a random car. Unfortunately, Dementis and his crew relentlessly pursue the duo and catch up to them. Furiosa attempts to shoot him using a boomstick given to her by Jack, but her left arm is caught and crushed between the car and a truck. Dementis then rams into her vehicle, wrecking it and capturing both of them. In the aftermath of this incident, he has Furiosa chained up, similar to the way he chained up her mother. However, he does not realize that she is the same girl he made a prisoner as a child. He asks where the two of them were going and yells that there is no hope for love in this wasteland. He then orders his men to chain up Praetorian Jack to a motorcycle and drag him along. This torture kills the poor guy in an excruciating manner. Meanwhile, Furiosa manages to slice off her injured left arm from her body and escapes on a bike. After a grueling few hours, she returns to the Citadel on the brink of death. She's now lost both her lover and her left arm, which contained a map that would lead her to the green place. But instead of giving up, she gathers all her anger and applies maggots to the stump of her arm to prevent the flesh from being infected. She also fashions a new mechanical arm to replace the one she lost. In the meantime, Immortan Joe begins the 40-day Wasteland War to wipe out Dementis and what remains of his biker horde for good. Fueled by her rage and grief at everything she's lost, Furiosa seeks a vehicle to hunt down Dementis by herself. From the scrap of the wasteland, she and a group of Immortan Joe's men put together a makeshift vehicle. As she rides off, one of the men gives her a nickname, the Darkest of Angels. On the other hand, Dementis has suffered huge losses in the war. He and what remains of his biker horde attempt to flee into the wasteland before Immortan Joe arrives. Unfortunately for him, Furiosa catches up to his crew, which is now down to merely 3 people. She kills everyone else and then pursues Dementis deep into the desert. She takes away his water, ammunition, and even one of the wheels of his motorbike while he sleeps. The following morning, she confronts him and asks him if he remembers her. But he has no idea who she is, and only recognizes her as the woman he tortured before Praetorian Jack's death. Dementis tells her that no one in the wasteland should have hope. Instead, they should have hate, as it's one of the great forces of nature. While she's distracted by his words, he makes a move to try to escape, grabbing the knife in her boot. But Furiosa is one step ahead of him, as it wasn't actually a knife at all, but just the broken handle of one. Dementis tries to talk his way out, saying that he was merely acting on instinct. But Furiosa wants to hear him scream in anguish, just the way her mother did when he tortured her. It is clear that the warlord still has no idea that she's the same girl he kidnapped all those years ago. Meanwhile, Furiosa continues to beat him multiple times until he finally passes out from the pain. When he comes back to consciousness, she goes over to his teddy bear and inspects it. At this moment, Dementis finally recognizes her and calls her Little D. He says that he's proud of Furiosa and the ruthless, vengeful person she's become. Dementis claims that he's been waiting for someone like her that is worthy of him. She replies that she's nothing like him, but he tells her that both of them are emotionally dead. In a mocking tone, Dementis asks if she has it in her to kill him in an epic fashion. At this point, the narrator of the movie reveals that Furiosa takes away his voice by cutting off his tongue. She then chains and drags him back to the Citadel. There, high above the cliffs, is a hydroponic garden where Immortan Joe grows his plants. Furiosa ties Dementus to the ground and plants the peach tree seed that her mother gave her right beside